In an industry long defined by treachery, shifting loyalties, and seismic upheavals, no single moment has reverberated through the world of professional wrestling with the sheer, earth-shattering force of Roman Reigns' return. This was no mere comeback. It was a cataclysmic eruption, a deliberate and devastating assault on the status quo. Reigns, the once revered tribal chief, did not step back into the spotlight alone. By his side was Jon Moxley, the most unpredictable and ferocious force in wrestling, a man whose very presence radiates chaos and unrelenting vengeance. Together, they did not simply rekindle the embers of their storied past as members of the Shield, they ignited a wildfire, a calculated declaration of war aimed squarely at Seth Rollins and his dominant faction, the Revolution. This moment, unfolding at Saturday night's main event, was not a nostalgic nod to fans yearning for a bygone era. It was a brutal, tactical rebirth, a thunderous statement that the wrestling world would never be the same. For months, Rollins and his meticulously crafted empire had ruled with an iron grip, their arrogance matched only by their ruthless efficiency. Comprising the cold, calculating power of Damian Priest, the cunning strategist J.D. McDonough, and the prodigious enforcer Bone Breaker, the Revolution had dismantled every opponent in their path, leaving a trail of broken bodies and shattered legacies. Rollins, the self-proclaimed visionary, had positioned himself as the architect of a new era, his promos dripping with smug superiority as he mocked the ghosts of his past, particularly Reigns, whom he dismissed as a faded monarch clinging to relevance. But Rollins' hubris blinded him to the storm brewing on the horizon, a storm that would descend with unrelenting fury and rewrite the narrative of professional wrestling. The air in the arena that night was thick with anticipation, the crowd buzzing as Rollins stood in the ring, basking in yet another victory. His words, sharp and venomous, cut through the noise as he taunted the absent Reigns, declaring the Revolution untouchable. Then, in an instant, everything changed. The lights dimmed, plunging the arena into an eerie stillness. A rhythmic heartbeat pulsed through the speakers, slow and deliberate, like the ticking of a bomb. Then came the words that have long been synonymous with justice and destruction: Sierra, Hotel, India, Echo, Lima, Delta. The Shield's iconic call sign detonated like a grenade, and the crowd erupted into a deafening roar of shock and euphoria. Roman Reigns emerged first, his silhouette a chilling monument to power and purpose. His presence was not that of a returning hero seeking adulation but a predator, silent and resolute, ready to reclaim what was his. Behind him came Moxley, dragging his signature barbed wire bat with a slow, menacing scrape, his eyes burning with a fury that seemed to pierce the very soul of the arena. This was no nostalgic reunion designed to tug at heartstrings. This was the Shield reborn, not as the hounds of justice who once fought for righteousness, but as an evolved, unrelenting force forged in betrayal, hardened by years of solitude, and driven by a shared hunger for retribution. Rollins and his faction, Priest, McDonough, and Bone Breaker, stood frozen, their carefully constructed aura of invincibility crumbling in real time. For the first time in months, Rollins' trademark smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of fear. The Revolution, so accustomed to dictating the terms of every battle, was now staring down the barrel of a war they hadn't anticipated, a war they might not survive. To understand the magnitude of this moment, one must revisit the origins of the Shield. In 2012, Reigns, Rollins, and Dean Ambrose, now Moxley, burst onto the WWE scene as a revolutionary force, a trio of renegades who operated with a singular, merciless purpose. They were not just a faction. They were a brotherhood, bound by loyalty and an unshakable commitment to upending the established order. Reigns was the muscle, a towering enforcer whose presence commanded respect. Rollins was the architect, his cunning mind always 3 steps ahead. Ambrose, the wild card, brought an unpredictable edge, his volatility making the Shield as dangerous as it was captivating. Together, they toppled giants, defied authority, and redefined what a wrestling faction could be. They were the embodiment of justice, a force that struck fear into the hearts of champions and corporations alike. But the very bonds that made the Shield unstoppable also made its collapse catastrophic. In 2014, Rollins' betrayal, a steel chair crashing against the backs of his brothers, shattered the faction and sent shockwaves through the industry. The betrayal was not just a plot twist, it was a wound that never fully healed, launching 3 distinct careers down divergent paths. Rollins reinvented himself as the cerebral manipulator, climbing the ranks through cunning and ambition, eventually assembling the Revolution to cement his vision of dominance. Reigns forged himself into the tribal chief, a stoic sovereign who ruled with iron conviction, building the bloodline into a dynasty before its own internal fractures brought it down. Ambrose, reborn as Jon Moxley, rejected the corporate machine entirely, carving a blood-soaked legacy across promotions like AEW, where his chaotic, unapologetic style made him a global icon. For years, fans dreamed of a Shield reunion, clinging to the hope that the Brotherhood could be restored. But no one could have foreseen this, not a reunion rooted in sentiment, but a strategic alliance born of shared scars and a mutual enemy. Reigns, who had vanished from the ring after the Bloodline's collapse, returned not as a king seeking to reclaim his throne but as a warrior with nothing left to lose. His silence during his absence had been mistaken for weakness, but it was a prelude to war. Moxley, ever the renegade, brought with him the same untamed fury that had made him a legend outside WWE's walls. His barbed wire bat, a symbol of his refusal to conform, was not just a prop, it was a promise of pain. Together, they descended on Rollins' empire with a terrifying synchronicity, their movements a haunting echo of the Shield's prime, yet imbued with a darker, more ruthless edge. Backstage, the fallout was immediate and chaotic. The locker room, already strained by the Revolution's reign of terror, descended into a frenzy of speculation and uncertainty. Wrestlers huddled around monitors, watching the carnage unfold, while producers scrambled to adjust the night's plans. The Revolution, once seen as an unstoppable machine, began to show cracks. Reports surfaced of heated arguments between Priest and Bone Breaker, each vying for control in the face of this new threat. McDonough, the faction's strategist, was said to have confronted Rollins, questioning his leadership and urging him to seek outside allies like Finn Balor or Tommaso Ciampa to bolster their ranks. But Rollins, consumed by pride, refused to entertain the idea of weakness. In public, he doubled down, dismissing Reigns and Moxley as relics chasing faded glory. Yet behind closed doors, sources claimed he was unraveling, holding frantic meetings with creative teams, security personnel, and even WWE management, desperate to regain control of a narrative slipping through his fingers. For Rollins, the true terror lies not in Reigns' calculated power but in Moxley's unpredictability. Reigns fights with strategy, his every move deliberate and devastating. Moxley, by contrast, is chaos incarnate, a man who doesn't just seek victory but craves the destruction of his enemies. Rollins knows Moxley's presence isn't about titles or legacy, it's about settling a score that has festered for over a decade. The betrayal that fractured the Shield left scars on all three men, but for Moxley, those scars fuel a fire that burns brighter than any championship. His return to WWE, even if temporary, is a mission of retribution, and Rollins is the target. For fans, this moment is more than a storyline, it's a seismic shift that has reinvigorated a wrestling landscape grown stale under Rollins' calculated dominance. The WWE universe is now a powder keg, every arena crackling with anticipation. Will Reigns and Moxley strike again? Will the Revolution implode under the weight of its own ego? Will other superstars, veterans like Randy Orton and AJ Styles or rising stars like Carmelo Hayes and Grayson Waller, choose sides in what many are calling WWE's new civil war? Even tag teams like DIY and the Street Profits are rumored to be aligning themselves, sensing an opportunity to etch their names into history. The questions are endless, and the stakes are monumental. Is this new Shield a permanent alliance, or will it fracture under the weight of its own intensity? Could Rollins, the architect of betrayal, be forced to reconcile with his former brothers in a desperate bid for survival? Will Moxley remain in WWE, or is this a fleeting detour before he returns to AEW, leaving chaos in his wake? And what of Reigns? Having lost his bloodline, is he building a new faction, darker and more ruthless than anything before, or is he done with empires, seeking only to destroy? One truth is undeniable. Reigns and Moxley didn't return to fit into the current era of wrestling. They came to dismantle it. This is not a battle for titles or accolades, it's a war for the soul of professional wrestling itself. The Shield, reborn in fury, has ignited a conflict that will leave no one untouched. When the dust settles, the question won't be who won, it will be what remains.